this is Angela. Welcome back to another unprofessional, poorly edited video on Strategize This. So, I have a little bit of a drive before I get to my next campsite. I am currently in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so, I'm thinking this is a pretty good time for us to talk about the topic of the fourth video. And I know somebody's going to text me. One of my friends are going to text me and say, you shouldn't be doing that while you're driving. I'm going to be paying attention to the road, don't you worry. So, I tried to record this video a couple of times before, and I was combining the season and the method of camping together, and it just made for a video. No matter what I did, the video was almost an hour long. It's just way too long, even for a long form video, unless you're like clearly saying it's a documentary. So, I expect these sometimes to go on, 30, 40 minutes, but I try not to get them too much longer than that. So, this is a long form video. It's part of the series that, about getting started in overlanding and in long-term camping, or any type of camping actually, and these are requested videos and requested topics. Okay, so this video, it builds on video number 2. So if you haven't watched video number 2, which has the title is I think it's the social and psychological impacts of camping, you might want to watch that first, but even if you don't watch it first, you want to go ahead and finish this. I'm making certain assumptions in this video that you've already watched video 2 and considered those circumstances, so I'm not going to be delving into them here. The other thing I'm not going to be doing is giving you like a pros and cons thing on each season, because lots of people do that on YouTube, and frankly they do a better job than I would anyway. So what I'm concentrating on are things that what I'm concentrating on to share are things that I have learned or were told by people who have more experience than me about each season, and things that sometimes only get considered as a secondary issue, but turn out to be pretty big problems. And if you want pros and cons of each season, there are people on YouTube that do a much better job of that kind of thing than I do. Okay, so since we're in the summer, let's start with the summer. And I'll tell you right up front, I detest camping in the summer. I hate bugs, I hate the humidity, I hate the heat, but I obviously, because I'm in right now, I do a lot of camping during the summer, months and months at a time. So, the thing is that I don't do any camping south of the jet stream. I try to get above the jet stream as quickly as I can, as early in summer as I can, in order to get into the cooler temperatures and the lower humidity and that Canadian type of feel, as far as weather goes. I can't, it's just too hot in Virginia, and I just can't take it anymore. So I try to stay out as long as I possibly can in the summer, to at least the end of August, hopefully. Sometimes I don't get that lucky, but I'm just letting you know up front, we're going to talk about summer. I hate summer, so it's very hard for me to see summer as an opportunity, but it is. So, okay, so summer is one of the top 2 most competitive seasons for camping. There's a lot of reasons for it. The first reason is there's a lot of people that are in transit, meaning people are moving around. The full-timers and the people who spend several months, such as myself, camping, they're on the move. They are getting where they're going to be for the summer. And this usually starts with the snowbirds starting to head back north from Florida somewhere around, late February, early March. And then it runs right on up until like the end of May. Some RVers are starting to leave, and some campers are starting to leave New England. New England is thawing out, and they want to get to visit their friends and family in other parts of the country. I know people who are on the East Coast. They go out to Arizona, which I'm like, it's hot there too. However, what they're doing is they're avoiding all the humidity. So, plenty of people moving around. But these people are not campers in the traditional sense, and this is why it's important for you, okay? When I come through an area, I might hit there on a Tuesday night, I might hit there on a Wednesday night, a Sunday night. I'm going to stay for one night, and then I'm going to pack up and go to the next campsite because I'm trying to get out to South Dakota. That causes a problem for people who are going camping for a week, and they're trying to find a camp. They're trying to find a week where they can go a straight series of 7 days without somebody interrupting that pattern. So it's people like me who are part of the problem. Now, a lot of the RVers and stuff, they stay in free places like Cracker Barrel and stuff like that. And then Harvest Host and Boondockers Welcome. They take some of the heat off the road. So that's pretty cool. Excuse me. So those are the people that are moving around in early summer that are causing problems for you as somebody who's trying to get into the campgrounds. Another reason why it's very competitive is because summer's hot and people like to do things that involve water. So when you're in a campground during the summer, the campsite next to you isn't just about sitting at a picnic table and playing cards all night or having a campfire and cracking open a few beers. Oftentimes, they've got a travel trailer or an RV that's being pulled by a truck or whatever. Then they have another vehicle with a boat trailer that has their fishing boat on it. And then usually it's a lot more people traveling together. Okay, so that can be problematic if you are thinking that you are going to go out during the summer and get peace and quiet in a campsite. It's not likely to happen unless you're going places that nobody else goes or no one else knows about. The other thing is that the campsites, the people that are in the campsites right now, so this is like Memorial Day weekend, okay? So the people that are in the campsites tomorrow, right now, literally are trying to make their reservations for next year for the same week. So what you've got to do as somebody who's trying to get into a reservation, you have to book, forget about, try to do what you can this summer and get out if that's what you want to do. But you need to be paying attention to next summer too. And as soon as those calendars open up, you need to jump on them and get the weeks that you want at whatever campground you want to stay at. One of the bigger challenges in summer is keeping things cold and keeping yourself hydrated and cool. Obviously, in most of the parts of the country, that just doesn't happen during the summer. And I've got friends that they say the hotter the better. Oh my gosh, whatever. I don't feel that way. So you're going to be spending money on like marine grade coolers. You're going to be spending money on I have a refrigerator that one side of it is a freezer and one side of it is it's like a refrigerator. It looks like a cooler, but it's a refrigerator and a freezer. The other thing you're going to be up against, let me mention this. The reason why picking the season that you're going to start camping or start playing around with this is that this is going to control how much money you're going to spend. Okay, this is going to dictate in a lot of cases how much money you're going to spend. your reservation charges and your campsite fees are going to be much more in the summer because it's a peak season. Okay, so let's go back to the other thing. But I just wanted to explain why I'm doing this video and why it's important. It's because you need to decide how much money you're going to spend and what you're willing to spend your money on. And I want to spend my money on gear, not camping fees. And so summer is extremely expensive. Kids are out of school. This is another reason why summer is very competitive. Kids are out of school. And I, as someone who doesn't have children, I don't really think about things like that. But sometimes this is the only time of year that people can go on vacation as a family and not feel like they're cutting off their kids' education. So, there's a lot more kids and, screaming and bikes and little scooters and all of that in the campgrounds during the summer. And, so you combine like multiple vehicles, sports, multiple families or groups of people meeting to go camping, little kids, and kids being in the campground playing and having a great time and laughing and cutting up, and their bikes and their scooters, and then you've got the pets, and a lot of people have multiple pets, and the campgrounds don't enforce that kind of stuff very well. So it's just, to me, for somebody who likes to get off by myself, it's just not an enjoyable time to go camping. Now, I will go and meet my friends in RVing Women or in the overlanding groups or whatever, because they have dedicated spaces, and so you're dealing just, it's kind of like having your own little neighborhood. So that's another advantage of joining a group like RVing Women, because you're in a block of campsites, and the RVW controls what happens with those sites. So it's more expensive. Parts of your gear are going to be expensive, your coolers and your stuff like that. There's going to be more people out. It's more competitive. Bugs, snakes, the whole thing, black widow spiders. I just had a little confrontation with some black widow spiders a couple of days ago. So that is kind of what you're up against during the summer. And summer is unique unto itself in that the gear that you're going to be using in the summer may not be applicable to any other season. So we'll talk about that when we start talking about fall and spring. Okay, so some of the gear that you're always going to spend a lot of money on, you're always going to spend a good chunk of money on your boots, unless it's your kids and they're still growing. They're in and out of shoes so fast, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on their boots. But if your feet have stopped growing or stopped spreading, whatever the case might be, I don't have any problem spending $200 or $300 on a pair of high quality camping boots. Now, I didn't have to do that this year. I bought some boots that I'm really happy with, and I bought a black pair, and then I bought a light colored pair that I could wear with like more casual clothing or dressy clothing or whatever. So you're always going to spend a lot of money on your boots because you got to take care of your feet and you want your ankles supported and all of that. The other thing I was going to tell you is the attractions that you want to go to and campsites and stuff like that, the lines will be longer, because there are so many tourists traveling around in the United States during the summer. Okay, so let's move on to the fall. Fall is another aggravating peak season, and I split fall up in two parts, like fall part 1 and fall part 2. How many minutes have I got going here? Okay, good. Fall part 1 and fall part 2. So fall part 1, I consider that like September 1st to say October 1st. September 1st. No, I'm sorry. September 1st to November 1st. And that is a peak season. It is also expensive. It is also crowded. It is hot during the day, but it is cool at night. So you can have some like traditional activities like cooking on a campfire and sitting around a campfire and having a good time, and it's not so hot, because I'll tell you, during summers I don't light a fire. So fall is competitive, especially on the East Coast, especially in the mountains of, say, North Carolina, Virginia, all the way up to Maine, because the leaves are changing colors. And there are a lot of people who are tourists that follow the changing of the color of the leaves. And it is beautiful. It is beautiful. But it slows down the traffic on Skyline Drive in Virginia. It's, there's a lot of people out there, and then they slam on the brakes, and they're like, oh my gosh, look at the red maple leaf. And, it's too many people. But the good thing is that a lot of it's starting to clear out a little bit. So in fall part 1, it's competitive, but sometimes you can still get time during the week on short notice. But the weekends, almost every weekend is going to be, you're not going to be able to work in on that. And the reason why is because the kids are back in school and people are back on their jobs. Maybe they're getting ready to gearing up for peak season for Christmas. And so so you can usually get some things in the campgrounds. Also, everything is still open. But because it is a peak season, it is still quite expensive. But the water sports, except for fishing maybe, are over with. Now, the people that are coming in, they're hunters. It's a different kind of group, okay? Now, the interesting thing about fall part 1 is that you can use that equipment that you buy in fall part 1 also in spring part 2, which we'll talk about. But you can kind of use that gear at the beginning of the fall season, and then in the late spring too. So that saves you a little bit of money. Let's see what else about fall. Still buggy. Still a little snaky, but I don't care. And to be quite honest with you, the snake issue with me, I'm not really afraid of snakes. I don't want encounters with snakes, but I'm not gonna like go home because I saw a snake in the campground. But typically there's not a whole lot in there. You don't have those encounters in formal campgrounds because it's just the traffic is too high, and most snakes don't want to be around people, that are constantly moving around and stuff. In the fall, you start to have less privacy because the leaves are falling on some of the trees. So you could go to a campsite in the summer, and it's very, very private because maybe it's all tucked in the trees and in the bushes and everything, and go back to that campsite in the fall, and it's completely exposed, and it's not private at all because the greenery has now died off. So just because you pick a campsite in the summer and you go, wow, I love this campsite, doesn't mean it's going to still love that same campsite in the fall because of how it changes. So the issues with camping in the fall, not too many. You'll spend a little bit of money on a sleeping bag, but I sleep hot. So like in the summer, I just use a sheet and a light quilt when I'm camping. And I'm talking about in South Dakota, I use a quilt or something light. But in the fall, you might get like a 30-degree bag or 40-degree bag or something like that. You don't really need intensive, expensive sleeping bags in the fall. You can also develop the skills like cooking on a campfire and stuff like that, but you're not going to be trying to develop a skill set of like a survivalist type of thing in the fall, because your conditions are not that extreme in the parts of the country that I'm talking about, which is mostly, southeast and the southern part of the country. Now, if you're up north and it's the end of October, you got a much different situation. So, but you have your own fall sometimes. Some of these places don't have a fall, but you have your own fall. So just pick your ranges. And in the northern part, you may not have a 2-part fall. You might just have fall, and then it goes to winter. In Virginia, where I'm at, fall is very similar to spring without the pollen. So now let's talk about fall 2. Now, the fall part 2, I love fall part 2. This is when I start going out. So this is going to be, a week or so before Thanksgiving, all the way through to maybe January, until you can't take it anymore or your equipment's freezing. Okay. Fall part 2 in Virginia and the southeast. Fall part 2, people are starting to get distracted by the holidays, so they don't even want to go to the campgrounds on the weekends. They're also getting to a point where some people who aren't very cold tolerant are starting to have a problem. Sometimes I'll hear people say, oh, no, when it gets below, 35 degrees, I'm not going out anymore. So that happens in November usually in my area. So fall part 2, you start dealing with some things that you haven't had to deal with yet. Okay. First of all, now the problem isn't keeping things cold. Now the thing is keeping things from freezing, which can be just as challenging. You can also damage your equipment if you're not keeping it insulated or warmed up enough to use it. You can blow your water pump. You can blow your plumbing. There's all sorts of things that happen during the fall that can, even like using propane and stuff. Sometimes fall and winter, your propane, depending on your elevation, the way it works can dramatically change. Then let's look at, but the prices now are coming down, but also the supply of campgrounds are coming down. So in my area, and maybe in yours, a lot of campgrounds start closing around November 1st. Some don't close until late December, but things start shutting down about November 1st. So these campgrounds, unless you're part of a group that's rented space after the campground is closed, you don't have access to a lot of the campgrounds. But the campgrounds that you do have access to, that's not considered peak season. So fall part 2, no bugs, no humidity, no snakes, just learning how to use your equipment. Usually you can get by with just one form of heat, either electric or propane. Both will work fine to keep you warm enough in your rig. So still, it's getting more challenging, but it's not horrible. I'm a winter camper, but even in winter camping for me, there's some parts of winter camping that I won't participate in. But I will tell you, if you're looking to be by yourself, then fall part 2 and winter is where it's at. Fall, people start not coming out anymore because the nights are getting too cold for them and they don't want to invest in the gear. And in the winter, there's a lot of people that say, screw it, I'm not doing it because it's too much to watch. Water lines, and you can't use this kind of heat, or you got to use the other type of stove when you're cooking. There's a lot of stuff that you have to learn differently in the winter. Plus, fatal errors that you make in the winter can kill you. So if you're going to develop a skill set like that, then you want to make sure that you're working with people who have experience of camping during that season. But I love camping during the season. during the season of winter. These campgrounds that are open are cheap. It's not considered a peak season. You usually can make reservations at the last minute. But the one thing that I don't like is that in some of the Corps of Engineers sites that are open fall 2 and winter, they flip over to a first come, first serve booking system. That means you just show up and whoever gets there first, you get a campsite. And I really hate that, because what if they don't have a campsite available? Then you've driven all the way to the campsite, packed up to camp, and then there's no campsites. Now, I suspect that if they're doing that, they don't worry about getting a lot of campers at that point. Okay, so first come, first serve, I don't have a lot of experience with it. The few times that I've used first come, first serve, it has been horrible. So, I mean, I may not have gotten the site I wanted, but I got a site and it was suitable and I had a good time. All right, so now spring. And your gear in winter, your winter gear is very expensive too. Okay, so now let's look at spring, because I break spring up in part 1 and part 2 as well. So spring part 1 is like fall part 2. That time where the temperatures are starting to drop, people don't want to come out anymore because it's too cold. So you're looking at fall, the last, kind of like around the holidays, kind of fall, and then when spring comes and things start warming up a little, or let's say you're not getting those hard freezes anymore, spring part 1 and fall part 2 are very similar. So if you want to go in either one of those seasons, hold on a minute, I need to help this trucker get over. If you want to camp in either one of those seasons, you'll probably be able to interchange your gear. Because just like in fall 2, in spring, fall 1, you're still dealing with crap freezing at night, things getting unexpectedly colder than what they were forecasting. Still no bugs, still no snakes, still no competition for sites until spring break. And when I'm talking about spring break, I'm not talking about K through 12 spring break. I'm talking about college spring break. That seems to be a dividing line for me between spring 1 and spring 2, because in spring 2, that's like fall 1. Things are warming up to a point that people want to come out. Things start gearing up. People are getting more competitive on what they want to do. They're not into boating and all of that yet. You can still have a campfire at night. The prices are not that bad yet, because you're not in a peak season. And your gear is pretty interchangeable between spring 2 and fall 1. So if you start practicing your camping in fall or spring, you can buy equipment that's good for both seasons, and that's kind of an advantage for that. Let's see what else. Oh, pollen in the spring. Spring 2. Lots of pollen. I'm highly allergic to it, and so I have a miserable time spring part 2 when all the pollen starts kicking off. So normally during spring break, college spring break, that's when I'll book somewhere for a week to do my gear test to make sure all my gear survived the winter. Like my water pump's fine, that my pipes aren't leaking, that I don't have mold growing anywhere, or mildew. That's when I start flushing out my tanks again and all that. So, okay, what else? All right, so let's talk about generalities, gear that you're going to need, and the seasons don't matter. Your hiking boots, we already talked about that, so I won't go over that point again. What's my time? Okay, 29 minutes. Okay, so you got to kind of think about, you know, your food, shelter, water, clothing. All right. So where you're going to spend your money is going to be, you know, protecting your food sources or deciding how you're going to eat in a particular season, what you're going to cook, what your meal plan's going to look like, and then being able to buy the equipment to keep that food safe, you know, whether it's cold or frozen or whatever. Your boots, like we talked about. Your clothing, like if you're going to do winter camping, you're going to be spending a lot of, I like to buy extreme cold weather stuff that's designed by the military because nobody does it better than them. So I like to buy Equix clothing, which is a multi-layering system that literally in January I have been in a campground, you know, in a tank top and a t-shirt, you know, a tank top and a little vest and a pair of Equix leggings and been perfectly warm. So, you know, it's possible to do that. And then, of course, how are you going to maintain your fresh water supply in each of the seasons? You're going to be spending a little bit of money on that. So, in one season, you might be buying, like for me, I just learned to drink my stuff, you know, whatever I'm drinking, it's the temperature of whatever it is. So I drink a lot of my stuff lukewarm. Hold on a minute. Hold on. Okay, I think I got my speed up. Had some 18-wheelers getting cranky with me. Okay, so how are you going to maintain your drinks? You know, how are you going to stay hydrated? That changes with your seasons as well. You know, in the winter, a lot of times I stay hydrated by drinking broth and obviously water and stuff. But, you know, like during the summer, a lot of times I just drink whatever the temperature of the water is. I do have a Yeti container now, a Yeti bottle, which keeps stuff cold longer. Okay, so food, clothing, okay, and then your shelter. Your shelter is important. So let's talk about the shelter real quick because I forgot to mention this. You know, my friends at RVW had told me that one of the risks of traveling in the season that I'm traveling right now, by the way, is that the weather patterns are unstable and they're very hard to predict. And they're absolutely right. Your shelter is going to change based on the season you're in. Okay, so you've got and then the more durable and the more specialized your sleeping container is, the more money you're going to spend on it. So like in the summer, you know, you get a one layer tent, a one wall tent, maybe a multi-room if you're doing base camping or whatever. You're wearing thin clothes that you got out of your closet. You know, you've got your new hiking boots, and that's good. And your silver infused socks and all of that, and that's fine. But you can get by with probably picking up a tent that's not too expensive in the summer because it doesn't have to endure a whole lot except, you know, a thunderstorm or whatever. Whereas in the fall, you might be using something that is, you probably could still use a base camp tent, which we'll talk about that in a different video. But you're not necessarily having to go two-wall tent. So, you know, in the summer, you have a single-wall tent with a rain fly on the top. I don't like the rain flies because it inhibits circulation, and you need that during the summer. But you know, so you have your single wall tent in the summer and then a double wall tent in the fall. You know, maybe with a rain fly. Then when you get into like late fall, winter, where the temperatures are extreme, you know, you might spend $1,000 on a tent because you're looking for an expedition grade tent that's low to the ground, that's easy to keep it warm, that's going to give you the space that you need, that can support a snow load and a pretty nasty storm. But we'll talk about gear when we get to it, but that's kind of why your gear, that kind of gear you're going to spend money on no matter what season you're camping in. Just keep in mind that if you decide that you're going to go out during fall and, you know, like maybe mid-fall and mid-spring, you probably can get 2 seasons out of whatever gear you buy. So I think I'm going to wrap this up for this video. Be thinking about what season that you want to go. Watch some other YouTube videos about the pros and cons of camping in the seasons, in each season, because that'll be a big help to you. And then make that decision, because the next video that I'm going to do is going to be the method of camping. So it's not just, and I can understand why people have a hard time deciding if they want to put the time in to start camping, because when you really start looking at it, it's very complicated. It can get very expensive very quickly. So now you're looking at, once you finish selecting the season that you want to camp in, now you know a little bit about what your circumstances are going to be. And now when we start talking about equipment and the methods of camping, now you'll be able to decide, okay, you know what, I'm not going to be doing, I want to do winter camping, but I'm not going to be doing it in a tent. That's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. Or I want to do summer camping, but I want to make sure whatever I'm in is air conditioned, you know. So decide on your seasons. If you haven't watched video number 2, go back and read that, watch that, because that's associated with this video. And then get ready for the next video, which will be, I guess this is the 4th video, so the 5th video will be on methods of camping. All right, have a great day.